Back live with you tonight here on In Focus. The Minister of Public Enterprises has told Parliament that Eskom will receive about 2 weeks' worth of diesel to begin managing its supply constraints. During yesterday's session with the Economic Cluster Minister Pravin Gordhan said a state-owned oil company, PetroSA, would make available 50 million litres of diesel to Eskom. The struggling power utility said this week that it had burnt 12 billion rands worth of diesel to mitigate against load shedding, and that it had no more cash to buy diesel for turbines, usually used during emergencies. Questions have now begun to surface about who would be responsible for the payment of the diesel. Joining us now to discuss whether the public should take responsibility is Saftu General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi and energy analyst Clyde Mallinson. You can also give us your views tonight on 072-110-5584. Should taxpayers be expected to foot the bill for the diesel at Eskom? Gentlemen, good evening and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Let me begin with you, Clyde. I mean, is South Africa navigating almost a perfect storm, so to speak, with this over-reliance on diesel to power up our homes, businesses, and so on and so forth?
Think of Eskom burning diesel the same way as a shopping centre would burn diesel when they have load shedding. So it's really the country's on load shedding, and one of the ways of mitigating against that is to put the whole country onto a big generator, and that's really what the open cycle gas turbines are. So PetroSA generally supplies Eskom. It's one of Eskom's suppliers, and they didn't run out of diesel. Eskom ran out of money. So basically, we've now got a 2-week reprieve, and Eskom have bought some diesel on a credit card, if you know what I mean. They'll work out how they're going to pay for it afterwards. But that's the situation we're in. We didn't run out of diesel. Eskom ran out of money, and they've now borrowed some money or given an IOU. At the end of the day, you and I know that we will pay for it as the taxpayer ultimately through one or other treasury bailout for Eskom, as has become the norm.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a moment. But talk to me about what this means. I mean, there are others who are saying, for example, a couple of years ago, we would use 10 million litres the whole year. Now we need 50 million litres for just 2 weeks, 15 days. Is that the extent of the deterioration of the power generating units at Eskom?
Yeah, Eskom are short of about 3,000 or 4,000 megawatts in generating capacity, and the open cycle gas turbines can generate 2,000 megawatts. But they can't generate 2,000 megawatts all the time. They can do that for maybe 3, 4, 5 hours a day. So it means that while they're running, we might have stage 2 load shedding. If they weren't running, we would have stage 4 or 5 load shedding. But the fact is they can't run all the time. Even if Eskom had an infinite amount of money, the logistics of getting the diesel to the open cycle gas turbines is such that they can't actually run more than about 40% or so of the time. So the maximum monthly spend would be 2.4 billion. The 50 million litres they've got now is about 1 billion, and you can see that works for about 2 weeks. So it's really just a stopgap measure. We can. The alternative is to increase load shedding, and the cost of load shedding to our economy is about 87 rand a kilowatt hour. The cost of diesel is about 5 rand 70. So it's a toss-up. Do we let the economy suffer by 87 rand, or do we let Eskom not run up a bill at the rate of 5 rand 70? And that's really the dilemma.
Yeah, and I'm putting it right at the feet of Zwelinzima Vavi. And that's exactly where I wanted to come to. It's either we let load shedding cost us 87 rands, Vavi, or we pay the diesel, I suppose, as taxpayers. Should we let Eskom put us in that situation? Because if we don't, it will cripple our economy.
But we not answering the fundamental questions you started with, Mfowethu. You're asking a fundamental question. In fact, I want to add the second one. Why all of a sudden we need to ban so much diesel in comparison to the past? But the second question is, who are the beneficiaries and who have been selling and smiling all their way to the banks as Eskom banned so much diesel? We want to just raise few issues. Number one is that the diesel used to lower the load shedding stages, particularly at peak times, is very expensive. It was a $130 per barrel in March as a result of the war, the imperialist war that is raging between the NATO using a front in the form of Ukraine and Russia, which is another sub-imperialist power invading other countries that were formerly Soviet Union countries. So it's very expensive. Secondly, that diesel banning is very dirty, and it is substantially a CO2 polluter at a time when Eskom is already contributing 20% of the continent's emissions. And as a result of that, we need to answer the two questions you were asking immediately. We need to move away from speaking with both sides of the mouth when we are articulating policy. It's either we have to move towards a new renewables, a just transition, and away from further polluting the Mother Earth at the rate at which it results into the calamities that we have seen in Durban, in Beira, in Mozambique, in Vembe, as early as 1991, and in Zimbabwe and in Zambia. We can't continue with the route that we are continuing in. So we've got to ask a question. Why all of a sudden we're banning so much diesel? That's the first point we wanted to raise. And secondly, we want to argue that the money spent on Eskom's grid stabilization instead of load shedding is net positive if we factor out the CO2 emissions damage. And so in lieu of any other energy resource or sources, since Eskom still refuses to install its own wind and solar, instead of relying on expensive multinational corporate privatization generation, we are not only addicted to coal, but also to diesel now. And so the economy urgently needs to fix for our veins. That's a second point we want to raise. And thirdly, we are concerned that the society is going to be made to pay yet again, subsidizing the souls of this world, the multinational corporations that are known to be guzzlers of electricity, such as the BHP, Bulletins, and others.
Yes.
At the time when there is actually effective racist load shedding, which is targeting black people, black working class, more than it will ever target the people who are subsidized and to get even cheaper electricity than me and you have to buy it.
I see those three questions, and we'll tackle them. I'll get Clyde to weigh in as well. But let me put this question to you then, Tatu Vavi. The stark reality is that we have a growing electricity supply deficit. We have 15 megawatts, if you like, that is completely all the time. I mean, from what I hear, the announcement, that is just not available. It's just not available for some odd reason. It's a planned breakdown, or it's not a planned breakdown. It's planned maintenance, or it's not. But it's just permanently not available. So the question would be, what would be your suggestion then for immediately addressing the question that we have of electricity supply deficit?
In our view, we should have moved quickly and way back to the renewables. We should have been relying more on our sun that no other continent can ever boast of. We should have moved and used our wind, which makes South Africa, the whole country, surrounded by the sea. And the people who are saying that the wind is a spare wheel are talking nonsense. Wind will be absolutely critical in terms of stabilizing the grid in South Africa. We should move to solar long time ago. We should have not allowed the multinational corporations to be the ones that are leading and our country into the renewable space. It should have been led by Eskom, and more importantly, Saftu argues that those renewables should have been placed in the hands of workers and communities that are more likely to be affected by any kind of scale down in terms of usage of coal, such as in Mpumalanga, in Limpopo, and even parts of the Eastern Cape. That's our argument. Why are we trapped into this status quo of banning diesel and not moving with the speed to the renewables, and therefore, in order to find a proper mix between our reliance on coal, but at the same time of accepting that over-reliance on CO2 will not be sustainable in the context of the devastating nature of the climate change calamity that is already out there for even the denialists and those that are sponsored by the coal lobbies and to see. And so that's our argument. Why are we here? Why are we not moving with the speed? Why Eskom was not allowed to lead our country into the space of the renewables ages ago?
Right.
Why are we having these independent power producers that are milking this country dry in terms of the rates of profits that we are spending on them? In fact, we are told that we're more likely to lose about 80 billion rands subsidizing these multinational corporations, the independent power producers, and they are making their kill in South Africa at the expense of our energy security, whilst we suffer the degradation of our environment, and whilst we're not moving fast enough and to meet the commitments that we have made to everybody in the world that we are going to move slowly, and but in a manner that doesn't threaten everybody's job in terms of moving the country from coal into the renewables.
We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll get Clyde to respond and cover some of the other areas as well. Let's take your thoughts. 072-110-5584. Should taxpayers be made to foot the bill for diesel that Eskom is piling up? We'll talk to those issues when we return. Stay with us. Back live with you tonight, you're in Focus, and thanks for staying on. I'd like to hear your views and thoughts tonight as we're hearing news that 50 million litres of diesel have been given to Eskom by PetroSA, according to Clyde, on credit card. At some point, you're going to have to get back and to pay that. Well, the question is, should taxpayers be fitting that bill? If they don't, well, we have load shedding. Would you rather have load shedding or pay for that diesel? Clyde, about 4 areas that Labour would like addressed. Maybe you want to just weigh in on that and give your thoughts on it. One is it easy to tell on the balance sheet of Eskom, income statement and expenditure, who is benefiting from this purchasing of diesel, and who are those individuals? And maybe there are politicians, others, who suggest are benefiting from that. Can we be able to tell that? Number 2, why are we here? Why is there seemingly the deteriorating of generation capacity ever increasingly becoming worse and worse by the day? And can we move faster towards the ability of new generation? And then also, can Eskom install its own capacity for solar and wind?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with the back end of your questions. And I'd first like to say that I'm thrilled to see the unions coming out in support of this just transition. In fact, it was the unions who first called for a move to renewables. Way back in a paper, I think it might have been NUMSA in 2012 or something. But then there seemed to be a little bit of backpedaling, and I think the unions have always been a bit, I don't want to use the word anxious, but a bit irritated that we had to rely on foreign companies to come and do the renewables, and it wasn't able to be owned, if you like, by local companies and local people. So first of all, I'm thrilled to see that. The second point is, why haven't Eskom been building? Well, Eskom were told when they wanted to build that they must stay in their lane. And Minister Montash very clearly said, it's not your job, it's the job of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, who control the IPP office. They were going to see to it how much renewable was installed, and Eskom were very quickly slapped down and told not to play in the space that wasn't theirs. So, it would be interesting to get a view on what's actually going on there. Why were they being stopped from doing that? And when it comes to looking at their balance sheet and who's benefiting from the diesel, it's not that easy to see. But basically, PetroSA that's selling them this chunk is a South African government-owned company as well. And I think with many of these transactions with fuels, whether it's coal or diesel, there often seem to be a lot of intermediaries, whether it's hairdressers or all sorts of people pop up. And it was interesting to hear Andre de Ruyter at the gathering today to say at least the solar and the wind can't be stolen by anyone, and it can't be exported to China other than in the form of value add of electricity. So that was quite interesting. I don't think we should think that anyone has tried to get us into this situation in order to be able to sell a bit more diesel. Yeah. It's far more bleak than that now. And I think when you've got a fleet that is operating right on the edge, your domino effect, when it's like playing a soccer team where every player is carrying an injury, and half of them are on yellow cards, and now you're starting to dish out some red cards, and you look across at your reserve bench and it's empty. So I endorse exactly what Comrade Vavi is saying, that we really need to and ought to have been building the replacement fleet at a level where we can build the new generation to allow the coal fleet to be systematically managed down. It's served us well. It deserves a dignified burial, one by one, as they reach their end of life, as it were. And instead, we watch them fall over, and then we scramble with diesel and all sorts of funny contracts to try and fill the demand gap. We've got it back to front. We should be building the new to create space to allow us to in an orderly fashion and with a just transition fashion, retire the old. And I couldn't agree more. I would love to see the democratization of the ownership of this new fleet in South Africa. I want to see 10 million South Africans all own a stake in this fleet. Yeah. But the decisions on what's allowed to be built by Eskom or anyone else actually, strangely enough, don't vest with Eskom. They vest firmly with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. And that really seems to be where some of the, I don't know if you want to call it shenanigans or blocking or whatever. I'm not sure what the motive could possibly be. Yeah. Perhaps we should ask the minister.
Maybe Saftu might have some ideas. But Clyde, let me stay with you a little bit. Seeing that, of course, now we are facing this growing pressure to transition to clean energy. Interesting that Andre de Ruyter says solar and wind will not be stolen or exported to China. Labour is arguing that actually the value that we should be deriving from this just transition is actually going to end up with international companies and will not actually benefit South Africans, which one might argue that is actually stealing the value away from South Africans.
Yeah, look, I know that we can fund a complete renewable fleet with about 10% of the country's pension funds, whether it's union pensions or my pension or your pension. 10% of our existing pension funds in South Africa would be able to finance a complete renewable fleet. Now, it obviously can't be done overnight. It would take place over 10 to 15 years. as we wound down the coal fleet, as each unit reached its dead stop date, when by law you have to stop it for safety reasons, we could do that. So yeah, we need to leverage our pension funds, and we need to also develop financial mechanisms where those who aren't fortunate enough to have pension funds, the unemployed, the jobless, the ticking time bomb give them a mechanism whereby they can also own a chunk of that fleet and get dividends from it. And so the local banking sector should be looking at ways of being able to lend money to the disenfranchised, as long as that money goes into financing a wind or a solar or a storage facility, where the dividends that they would receive from that facility would be greater than what would be required to pay back their loan.
Yeah.
And basically each year they would get more money until the loan was repaid, and then we would have a country where instead of 28 million people living on social grants, we would have 28 million people living on renewable energy dividends. So that's the vision I have. And I don't think the vision I have and what Saftu have is in fact different at all. It's the same vision.
Dr. Vavi, key question here is, from what we're hearing and the questions you've been asking, the questions that Clyde is asking, is that there are politicians clearly who have made decisions and have created this problem. It's almost as if it's a self-made problem. What is the motive?
Exactly. That's a question that Clyde is correctly asking to all of us in South Africa. And we want to add into that question by giving you this context. The first point that we are arguing as Saftu is that the taxpayers who are also the Eskom customers must not shoulder the burden of having to pay for this extraordinary reliance now on diesel and or on the failure of Eskom as a whole. Why? Because the crisis we are facing is the failure of Medupi and Kusile coal-fired power plants. And let's remember this. These two coal-fired power plants were commissioned by Eskom's chairperson then, Valimusa, 15 years ago, who then arranged a massive boiler procurement contract in a direct and for the sake of benefiting Hitachi, a company where the ANC owns 25% of it, and who also was sitting in the finance committee of the ANC, which was again the whole issue proven over by every expert, a very incompetent exercise, and even the simple welding tasks of 7,000 needed to be redone as a result of that incompetence. And we are now where we are, where instead of us spending 160 billion rands, we spent 450 billion rands, leaving Eskom with this current 400 billion rands of debt. That's where we're coming from. The people who have benefited from that debt, we argue, is Hitachi and the ANC. And that's why elsewhere, these guys have been fined, for example, in the United States of America, and they've paid heavy fines. But here in South Africa, where we are basically the crime scene of their own deeds, they are not being held or being held accountable. That's the fundamental question that I think we must debate as the country, as why are we being made to pay for a 400 billion debt that Eskom owes, clearly, which we argue is an odious debt. Odious debt means that we shouldn't be paying that amount of money because it's the money that the World Bank, the IMF, all of them borrowed to Eskom And when they knew exactly that this was corruption, that they were funding corruption, the country must be saved from having to pay for that corruption of Hitachi and where the ANC owns 25%. That's the bottom line. So that's the answer, Clyde.
Yeah.
We are being made to fund corruption. And the workers, the people of this country who are being discriminated against through this current load shedding must refuse to pay that 400 billion. And we must call on the government, the ANC, the alliance included, to rather step up a campaign together with us to say no to repayment of the odious debt that was paying the corruption, the overruns, both in the timelines and budget that we saw both in Kusile and Mitupe. That's the bottom line. I suspect that everything else that we may be dealing with here, including answering your basic question, why are we suddenly burning so much diesel and who are the beneficiaries? The day we go deeper into finding out who are the sleeping partners to all of these independent power producers, multinational corporations from elsewhere in the world, the more we will find out why are we being made to fund multinational corporations, why are they being allowed to rake billions out of a country that have its economy on its knees as a result of the record-breaking load shedding that have been allowed to go on for the past 15 years. We need to have a commission, an independent commission of inquiry, to go into the details. And I ask you, Fogamdulu, invite the experts to go deeper into these independent power producers' contracts with the government. You will be shocked. Today we were in a workshop and in a political school with Rosa Luxemburg and Saftu. We were absolutely shocked to hear the extent to which this country has been sold to the lowest bidder through these independent power producers who are milking this country dry. We want to know who are the beneficiaries of this milking of this country by these multinational corporations.
Let's leave it there. Appreciate your time, gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming on. That is Zwelinzima Vavi there alongside Clyde Mallinson.